Reading Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill to find out the characteristics of mysticism itself. What is it? What are the characteristics of mysticism? Chapter 4. The spiritual history of man reveals two distinct and fundamental attitudes towards the unseen. It's funny how she can find that there's two distinctions. The two methods whereby he has sought to get in touch with it for our present purpose, I will call these methods the, quote, the way of magic and the way of mysticism. Seems there's the two ways. Having said this, we must at once add that although in their extreme forms these methods are sharply contrasted, their frontiers are far from being clearly defined, that starting from some point they often confuse the inquirer by using the same language, instruments and methods, whence much which is really magic is loosely and popularly described as mysticism. They represent, as a matter of fact, the opposite poles of the same thing. What do you think she means here? Transcendental consciousness of humanity. What is this magic stuff?
Kind of magic.
It's either magic or mysticism. All right. Well, she's a good analyst, so we'll find out what she says. Between them lie the great religions, which might be described under this metaphor. We're just using a metaphor here, as representing the ordinarily habitual regions of that consciousness. Thus, at one end of the scale, pure mysticism shades off into religion. Quote, shades off into religion from some point. What do you mean? You get that?
It fades, certainly.
Shades off.
Somebody has it, talks about it, and then it becomes, from generation to generation, just a religion.
What does she mean, shades
because they
off?
don't have the direct,
Oh, okay. The shade of it. Some points of view seem to grow out of it. No deeply religious man is without a touch of mysticism, and no mystic can be other than religious. You basically got to be religious to be a mystic, don't you think? You can't be a non-religious mystic. That's absurd.
Religion, meaning the meaning of religion is, it is
It's kind of
connected to
absurd.
God. So
That's the
depends how
definition.
much you expect from a religion.
In the psychological, if not in the theological view of the word, at the other end of the scale, we shall see later, religion no less surely shades off into magic. Now religion shades off into magic. Interesting point.
Yeah, once that reunion happens, it's magic.
Then it becomes ritual.
There's no way you can explain it.
It's amazing. This is why this is a good book. She's full of accurate metaphors. Impressive. The fundamental difference between the two is this. Magic wants to get. Magic wants to get it. Wants to get. Mysticism wants to give. Mortal and goodness.
Oh, you don't have to read the Latin.
Mortal and antagonistic attitudes, which turn up under one disguise or another in every age of thought. But magic and mysticism, their full development, bring the whole mental machinery, conscious and unconscious, to bear on their undertaking. Both claim that they give their initiates power unknown to ordinary men. But the center around which that machinery is grouped, the reasons of that undertaking and the ends to which these powers are applied differ enormously. In mysticism, the will is united with the emotions in an impassioned desire to transcend the sense world in order that the self may be joined by love to the one eternal and ultimate object of love, whose existence is intuitively perceived by which we used to call the soul. Used to. But now find it easier to refer to the cosmic or transcendental sense they used to call the soul. This is the poetic and religious temperament acting upon the plane of reality. In magic, the will unites with the intellect in a passionate desire for supersensible knowledge. This is the intellectual, aggressive, and scientific temperament trying to extend its field of consciousness. Do you think that scientists are just magicians? Magic trick? In some ways.
To what degree?
Field of consciousness until it includes the supersensual world, obviously the antithesis of mysticism, though often adopting its title and style. It will be our business later to consider in more detail the characteristics and significance of magic. Now it is enough to say that we may class broadly as magical all forms of self-seeking. Transcendentalism is just self-seeking. It matters little whether apparatus which you use for the incantations of the old magicians, the congregational prayer for rain of Orthodox Christian church men, or the consciously self-hypnotizing devices of the New Thought. Whether the end proposed by the evocation of an angel, the power of transcending circumstance, and the healing of disease. She's saying that it's just, if you just, as a congregation, pray for rain, that's a little bit on the magic side. Is that true? It seems a little bit.
I think people used to do that.
Well, shall we pray for rain? The object is always the same, the deliberate exaltation of the will, till it transcends its usual limitations and obtains for the self or group of selves something which it or they did not previously possess. It is an individualistic and acquisitive science in all its forms, and activity of the intellect seeking reality for its own purposes, or for those of humanity at large. Mysticism. whose great name is too often given to these supersensual activities, has nothing in common with this. It is non-individualistic. It implies, indeed, the abolition of the individuality, of that hard separateness, that, quote, I, me, mine, which makes of man a finite, isolated thing. It is essentially a movement of the heart, seeking to transcend the limitations of the individual standpoint and to surrender itself to ultimate reality for no personal gain. Yeah, how do you gain anything? If we pursue mysticism, is it going to make us rich?
Again, is there anything better?
No personal gain
It
to
is better.
satisfy. No transcendental
No loss and no gain, they told the other poet says. Calvin.
transcendental curiosity to obtain no other worldly joys, but purely for an instinct of love. By the word heart, of course, we here mean not merely the seat of the affections, the organ of tender emotion, and the like, but rather the inmost sanctuary of personal being, the deep root of its love and will, the very source of its energy and life. The mystic is in love with the absolute, not in any idle or sentimental manner, but in that vital sense which presses at all costs, through all dangers, towards union with the object beloved. Hence, whilst the practice of magic, like the practice of science, does not necessarily entail passionate emotion, though of course it does and must entail interest of some kind, mysticism, like art, can not exist without it. We must feel, and feel acutely, before we want to act on this hard and heroic scale. It's heroic. You can't be without feelings. You gotta feel something. And passion. You have to have a burning. You have to have a burning passion. No, it just says you. I don't know what it said about art. It just said mysticism, like art, cannot exist without it, with the passionate emotion. We must feel acutely before we want to act in this hard and heroic scale. We read about the characteristics of mysticism in Chapter 4 from Evelyn Underhill. So now we know that the difference between magic and mysticism. So she classifies things. She's like, figured it out.